The Tangsan Weeping Forbidden Lands continent. On the high cliff that was in this territory was seen the appearance of a man in all black clothes. He was looking at the people who were standing around with swords and other similar weapons. One of the guys addressed him by the name Demon Chu, saying that he had spent his entire life humiliating others and doing terrible things. Did he ever think that he would die here on Mount Han? The girl next to him expressed her reasons for hating him, reminding him that he had seduced her sister and pushed her to death, so she threatened to mercilessly wipe him into powder for it. The older man said that they had been hunting him for 3 whole months, so now he had nowhere to run to. The guy listened to the reasons for revenge of the people screaming below, some saying they would avenge their poor student, and some reminding him of their own similar situations. He didn't react to it in any way. His gaze continued to be cold and indifferent, as if he wasn't really bothered by it. Blood dripped from the sharp sword he held in his hand, its blade glistening from the daylight, leaving behind red stains on the ground. Someone called his name. The boy turned his head back with a piercing stare. In front of him was a girl who hung in the air thanks to her magical battle tool. She said that he had already fallen quite low due to his committed actions. It was Chi Mengdi, the master of Yunxia mountain of Taisu Holy Land. She asked if he regretted it. The guy immediately started laughing loudly from her question as if she was talking some nonsense. He mockingly replied that he had studied for just under 100 years and had fought his entire life, so he hardly regretted anything. He looked around at the furious people and wondered who among them would dare to call themselves invincible and indomitable. Quickly changing his emotions from mocking to serious, he said that he regretted only the harshness of the time. The girl told him that if they had not troubled him for hundreds of years, no one would have been able to resist him. He did not repent of his sins, so there was no need to blame them all for their cruelty. The girl threw her sword towards the guy and shouted to everyone else to kill him. People immediately rushed to attack to finally put their long-awaited plans into action. Not to be confused, he started to make some special gestures with his hands. He had a smile on his face, which meant he didn't feel fear, just confidence and strength. He jabbed his index finger at some mechanism on his hand and immediately a red light filled the space around him. The people around him immediately realized that he was trying to escape, but they couldn't let that happen. They had been trying to catch him for too long. The bright colors from the swords illuminated everything around him. The guy found himself between 3 souls of different gods with the words, "May divine energy pierce the heavens." It filled more and more power. After these words there was an explosion with a strong impact. People were thrown back. Broken stones from the rock flew in different directions. The bright red light did not allow to see what was beyond it. The sword collapsed to the floor, creating a loud clang, hitting the stone surface with its iron handle. Most of the bloody blade was broken off. In the end, Demon Chu had lost. He had destroyed himself. The people lying on the ground where they had been thrown by the blast wave, trying to catch their breath and recover from such a shock. An elderly man exhaled a sigh of relief, saying that if he had gone to Tianqiong to destroy monsters, he would have become the greatest warrior of mankind. Everyone started to leave with a sense of peace into the sunset. The sun was shining with a bright yellow light, creating a beautiful kind of pink hue in the sky. But Demon Chu had a different opinion. Did they really think that this guy would let himself die so easily? There are a total of 18 spiritual mountains in the Taisu Holy Lands. All the masters of Mount Tangxiang, Yunxia and Tianjian are recognized as top-level holy teachers, and all the masters of the other mountains are recognized as lower-level holy teachers. A month later, on Yunxia Mountain, a red ray could be seen from the window of a castle whose design was very unusual and in black. This is the castle of the senior disciples. There was a guy with long hair lying on the pillow, a smile on his face. He said to himself with a bit of mockery that here he was. Demon Chu had returned again. He slightly got up from the bed. He said that he, Chu Xiu, was a student at the university before he migrated. For today's rebirth, he had prepared 3,781 backup plans and 1201 rebirth methods. Laughing at himself, he didn't understand how he had managed to die with such preparation. He walked around the room a bit, looking at his current place of residence. He said that it must have been fate that brought him here, as it was the holy lands of Taisu. He received a letter that said that the revival of the master was discovered, and then came a second one, which said that the update of the functionality of the system. The next message was already with a choice. Demon Chu carefully read it. There was a choice of what kind of villain he wants to wear: a natural villain, he continues to receive rewards as long as he will do evil, or hidden villain, since he has already died once. He decided to lay low to gain strength before he starts to do evil. He thought about it, since in his last life he had chosen the path of a born villain, going around doing bad things. He smiled and said it was fun, but being the one everyone hated he didn't really like, so this time he decided to lay low. He had a cunning plan in his head to secretly become stronger and expose himself to the world one more time. Wouldn't that be great? He imagined that if he could become a god's favorite, then he would be allowed luxuries in the form of beautiful girls. Clapping his fingers, he decided definitively that this time he would choose the hidden villain. The new email said that the path had been chosen, and then the download started, followed by a message saying that the download was complete. He asked the system to open his profile, wanting to see who he had been reborn into this time. In his profile window was all of his information: Master, Chu Xiu. Personality, close senior disciple of Yunxia. Development, none, maximum terribly useless disciple. Talent 17. Ordinary. Technique development, due to the master's soul being too strong. Strong obsession was removed. Disadvantage, -18 darkness. Penetration points 0. Total combat strength score, you are barely stronger than a spiritual chicken. While he was reading this, comments of dissatisfaction could be heard from him at who he was now. Based on all this information, one could only wonder what this guy was even doing before he came. 10 days ago, Chu Xiu had dueled against a disciple from Mount Tianqiong because he was jealous of a girl. Poor Chu Xiu was exposed from one strike in the arena, and his cultivation was destroyed. Demon Chu, sitting at the table, bowed his head with pity for this guy, said that since he was now in his body, it was worth avenging him. Now he needed to create a stronger body. After 1 hour of being in the lotus posture in harmony with himself, Demon Chu realized that this body was too useless. No talent. Also crippled. With his sly smile, he uttered that he had just the plan for just such an occasion. Yunxia Mountain, near where a huge amount of autumn yellow leaves were falling from the trees. A small group of people were sitting at a table outside and discussing the recent events that the mountain master had returned 3 days ago from hunting Demon Chu. One of them inquired whether he was killed in the end or not. The guy laughed a little and replied that Demon Chu might be invincible among his peers, but he was only a disciple of the lowest holy level. There was no way he could have escaped from a dozen higher holy levels. The others added their opinions to his words, saying that it was a good job and such a terrible person like him should have been destroyed. Demon Chu looked behind a tree not far from them and watched them with a smile. They didn't even realize that he was not only alive but was standing right behind them. He decided that if he couldn't kill them, he would at least join them. He came out from behind the tree, coughed a little and stood right in front of them. Everyone looked at him a little surprised at his sudden appearance. The guy started to knead his hands a little as if preparing for a blow, and when asked if his wounds were healed, the guy said with a calm expression that they were fine. He walked past them, walking up the stairs and humming some song. The guys looked at him with surprise. After the guys were left alone again, a guy from their company sarcastically asked if he had any ties with demons. His friend replied that Chu Xiu was the namesake of Demon Chu. The third guy was not surprised by his behavior. A little proudly told his friend that he was making too much up. If there were demons, he would not let his cultivation be destroyed. He agreed with his words. Chu Xiu at this time was heading down the steps to the entrance of the castle. He knocked on the large gate, addressing the master that his disciple was requesting a meeting. Once in the middle, he headed forward through the spacious, huge castle. At a round, small table sat a girl. The appearance of Chu Xiu surprised her, said that 10 days ago he was injured in battle, and now comes to her, guessing the purpose of his arrival. She immediately asked if he wanted to ask her for help with his teachings. Chu Xiu got down on one knee, folded his hands in front of him and kindly asked her to do so. The master replied that he had too low learning ability, but despite that he still liked to get into fights, so he deserved this outcome. Added that she couldn't help him and told him to leave. He immediately started rudely asking if she knew why he had such a low learning curve, how he could even become strong without any resources. Said she gave all the resources to his elders, so why can't she tell him how to get stronger when she gave everything to others? Her hand walked across the small table as she stood up, saying that his behavior was outrageous. With a disgruntled expression, she said that he lacked talent, was lazy to study, so he also dared to accuse her. Chu Xiu slightly smiled. He questioned her. Wasn't the reason why she wasn't giving him any resources was because he had the same name as Demon Chu? Said that she held a grudge against him. Doesn't it look funny? The girl got angry at his words, apparently because he was right in his words. She flew up from her seat with the words that she was never angry with him. She sent him to go back. In the meantime, she would look for some medicines for his wounds, after which he could continue his training. Chu Xiu immediately began to refuse her offer since she could help him right now. She asked in incomprehension what he was talking about. The guy replied that he heard the master had a healing fragrance property. He came close to her and said that if he could train with her, not only would his wounds heal, but also his talent would increase. The girl was shocked at his pushy behavior, as she wasn't used to seeing him like this. She asked again what he had just said. Her words sounded harsh and definitely did not denote positive emotions. The guy leaned in slightly, took her hand lightly and asked again for the opportunity to study together. The girl immediately pulled away from him, shouting that he was a disobedient student, even threatened death for such behavior, asked how he even dared to mock her in her own temple. The smile from the guy's face still did not disappear, said she would break his bones and expel him from her mountain that very day. Chu Xiu put 2 fingers to her lips. The guy was standing opposite her with a slight smile. Around them were shards of blue-colored shards from the girl's sword that she had directed at him with her higher powers. Her legs were bent slightly at the knees while she was in the air. She realized that something was wrong. There was no way she could unleash her higher powers to do what Chu Xiu had promised. The guy, again smiling, asked her to do the same thing that he had asked before. On his face it was clear that most likely he had a little influence on her powers to fulfill his goals. The girl was already shouting, asking what he was doing to her master, continuing to call him a disobedient student. He pulled his hands to her face, asking her to teach him. The girl tried to tilt her head back away from his touch. In her attempts to deflect, she fell to the floor, with a pitiful voice asking why he was doing this to her master. But she couldn't understand the reason for not being able to use her abilities. It was like she was a normal person. Chu Xiu leaned towards the girl with a smirk on his face, saying that he was the one who sealed her skills. He took her by the chin to direct her gaze into his eyes, said that on that day when he was being chased by dozens of saints, he secretly used the samsara blocking seal. This precious item in the form of a small iron box was given to him by the system. By those words, he meant the mother and son samsara blocking divine power seal. Continuing to look into her eyes while the girl was powerless in front of him, he said that under the influence of the divine power seal, any woman would obey his orders unquestioningly. With those words, the smile on his face did not come off. Feeling proud and powerful in front of her, he slightly twisted her head from side to side, carefully looking at it. He said that she was already more than 1,000 years old, but the skin is still incredibly soft. The girl asked how he even dares to say such disrespect to her. Is he not afraid that she will kill him for such behavior? He smiled and said, "Let her kill him right now, or she is only barking and not able to bite." The girl did not answer anything and turned her head aside. Her face was disgusted with his words and in general with him. Quietly whispered in her ear that if he told the master of the Peak Holy Sword, Lu Xiu, that she had lost her strength, then asked her what she thought the master would do to her after that. After all, once long ago she had killed her father with a single swing of the sword. It was unlikely that she would miss the chance to take revenge on the killer. The girl realized that this woman would kill her immediately. She was crazy, so there was no way she could let her know about it. Finally the girl spoke. She said that no matter if he wanted heavenly materials, earthly riches, or resources to develop the ability, she decided that she would give him anything he wanted. He abruptly grabbed her shoulders with his hands, saying that he didn't need any of these things at all. He only wanted one thing. The girl immediately began to refuse, saying that she would never do it, and how dare he think of such a thing. She began to try to get away from him, saying that she had the power of the supreme saints in her. How could she obey such a lowly man like him? Chu Xiu did not antagonize her with her or the Taisu Holy Land, and she still participated in the chase to kill him, said that she now knew the feeling of fear. He held her shoulder so that the girl could not break free, pressed the system message with the words that it was an ancient development technique that she could use, so decided to leave it to her. The book was glowing with a yellow light in the girl's eyes. They were also tense in thinking about where this disciple got such a brilliant technique from. There are traces of the heavenly Tao in it. It's simply unbelievable. The two of them were at the master's main seat in her castle. Chu Xiu leaned towards her and shouted how about it. The girl began to shout for him to leave. He asked her to just give what he needed, but she was unable to break free. Suddenly she felt something unexpected. The system alert had information that the master had become a disobedient apprentice, no worse than a great villain, so he gets 1,000 points. The girl slightly groaned, trying to hide her emotions. Once again, the alert said that the master had paired up with immortal Mangdi. Their wounds had recovered, and their skill positions had been changed. She clutched the pink sheet tightly in her hand. The master's skill became bigger and bigger. Points continued to be credited. The alert said that the master's skill had reached plus 317. It was already divine grade. His training continued to advance. A few hours later, when it was over, Meng Di was lying on the bed, not even trying to look towards the departing Chu Xiu. The alert said that the master was now at the 9th step of skill building. He turned around, thanked her with a smile and bid her farewell. The girl exhaled and turned to him. She sat down hugging her legs. Her state was depressed after what happened. She told him that she had already given him what he asked for and he promised to break the seal afterwards. Chu Xiu, with a smile on his face, which further signified his vile attitude towards her, said that of course he wouldn't do that. She immediately shouted that he was horrible. Did he really want to kill his master? Chu Xiu, without turning around, replied that if she didn't want people to know about her sealed powers, she should hide them well. He showed her the blue orb in his hand and asked if she knew what this sealing crystal was used for. The girl was infuriated by these words. If he had also kept the images. The guy tossed the ball in his hand and laughed, as if he was proud of the fact that he had made it to blackmail her even more and use it for his own purposes. He turned around and said cheerfully that he would keep it as a souvenir. Heading down the steps to the exit, he waved his hand and warned that for their continued cooperation, it was not worth trying to break the seal, and even if she could search the entire Tianqiong Continent, other than her disciple, that is him, no one would be able to break the seal unless it was the reincarnation of the divine emperor himself. So it seemed the girl had nothing left but to obey him. He reminded her that this world doesn't have a divine emperor and she knows it, and if her disciple dies, she will live this life as an immortal until her life is cut short somehow. Meng Di sat and was amazed to hear the information that she has no way out. Chu Xiu added that if she does not believe it, she can check for herself. In addition, he will die, and the images from this crystal will be spread throughout the continent. And what the inhabitants of the continent of Tangsen will think then is not difficult to guess. With these words, he calmly walked outside. The girl looked at him, saying to herself that he would definitely die in hell's pain. Left alone in her temple, she screamed at the top of her voice that he was a despicable bastard, and how such a lowlife who had crossed the boundaries of Daogong could seal her powers. In the dark night sky, the bright moon was shining brightly. Chu Xiu looked at it and was surprised that he would come early in the morning and finish late at night. Walking down the steps that led to the Meng Di temple, he realized, thanks to the master's help, he was able to reach the 9th step of skill mastery, so he would need to wait a bit before stepping over the boundaries of Luan Hai. He thought about the fact that if the boundaries of Luan Hai were a barrel of water, then the mastering process was the process of assembling a tree. The more stable the mastering process is, the better and stronger the Luan Hai boundaries are. The results of the path of skill development do not stand still. In his past life, he had failed because he missed building the boundaries, making his skills unstable when developing. It was evident on his face that some plan had already matured in his mind. He decided that if that was the case, he should forcefully rebuild his bounds to create the best possible skills. By the time he faced a disciple whose skills would be above his level, he would be able to win the battle. Turning to the temple that was lit up by lanterns under the night sky, he thought, maybe the skill foundation resources he had hidden here years ago are still in this canyon. If they are still here, then he should figure out a way to leave Taisu's holy lands. On the signboard at the entrance of the building, he saw a sign that read Fast Boat Hiring Shop. A plan matured in his mind. He flew the boat across 2 lands that were separated by a river. Standing on the boat, a light cool breeze blew into his face. He headed more and more towards the bottom, closer to the river. He stopped and stood at a small cluster of rocks, among which was a single dry tree. His resources for the basics he had hidden must be somewhere in this place. He walked over to a huge rock among the others, but this one was different in color. It was darker than the others. He lightly bit his finger to get his own blood. With quick movements he drew a pentagram on the dark stone. The stone began to be covered in red spots and emitted steam as if it was heating up, lifting it into the air with his powers. Underneath it was a chest. There were small black bags tied to each corner of the chest. The resources were indeed still here. The guy even chuckled a little at the fact that they weren't going anywhere. Suddenly someone addressed him as Chu Trash. The voice said he didn't think he would meet him here yet. The guy turned his head back to see who was talking to him. A boat with 2 guys and a girl on it was approaching him. One of them was Peak's disciple Tan Zhang, who grinned and asked if he was still alive, but he couldn't imagine meeting him after 10 days. Jan Meng said that it seemed like Master Yunxia had taken good care of him since she had given him the recovery medicine. This was the guy who had mocked Demon Chu and destroyed his skills 10 days ago, and how dare he even dare to appear before him after that. He didn't like this guy's insolence. Chu Xiu silently stepped onto his boat, which gave off a red light when it was in motion. His boat was many times smaller compared to those guys. He headed in the opposite direction to them with the words that he would take revenge on him later as he had his own urgent matters right now. Without turning around, he told him that he would be waiting for him in 10 days in the arena to fight again. Jiang Meng turned to his comrades, put his hand to his ear and asked if he had just heard correctly. From his facial expression you could understand that he was mocking, as if Chu Xiu is not capable of such things, and his threats are just empty words. The guys were laughing their stomachs, repeating his words that he was waiting for him in the arena, saying that the trash again wants to fight with Mr. Jiang. It was terribly funny to them, because in their eyes Chu Xiu was a weakling, especially since he had recently lost to him. Jiang Meng at this time only waved his head and was proud of himself that he was so strong compared to Chu Xiu. Jiang Meng walked to the edge of the boat and spread his hands apart as if he was in a concentrated state. Sound waves appeared at a distance of 1,000 li from the two sides where his palms were pointing. The waves filled the vast space around them and spread further and further. The guy said that Chu was useless. 10 days ago he even almost killed him in front of Master Yunxia, and since he was looking for death and challenged him to a fight again, after 10 days in the arena, that he would not blame him for the outcome of the fight. The inhabitants of the valley looked at the sky from where the voice of Jan was coming. One of the guys said that Chu Xiu is completely crazy. Why he again stuck to the arena? His friend replied that he thought his sea of strength destroyed. How he will fight with Jan Meng, who is in the final stages of development. The other guys did not feel sorry for Chu Xiu. On the contrary, said that in 10 days, they are all waiting for something interesting. Chu Xiu stopped the boat opposite at the entrance of his master's temple. He stood in front of the huge gate to the temple, said that in the chambers of the master's spiritual energy is very dense, decided that tonight he will study there. He was sure that the master will not mind, because what belongs to him is his by right. The master belongs to him, and so all her also his. He opened the door and went in wishing him a good evening. His mood radiated positivity. He told the master that his apprentice was back again. Meng Di lay still in the same spot where she always was, told her that her unruly apprentice was back again at this late hour. She rudely asked what he was already going to do this time. Chu Xiu smirked and asked if the master wanted to repeat what they did in the morning. The girl shouted for him to get away from her, calling him a treacherous disciple. He moved much closer to her, put his hand to her face and said he had something more entertaining to do. Many red-colored system cards appeared in front of them. Meng Di was slightly startled by the suddenness of their appearance. He shouted the words of formation jump. All these cards flew one by one towards the exit. The guy controlled them with 2 fingers of his hand. With a fast speed, they all flew out the open door to the street. The entire courtyard around the temple was filled with fog. Meng Di seemed to understand what it was, but decided to clarify if it was the legacy of the primordial formation methods. Chu Xiu smiled and said that she was not bad since she understood what it was. He decided to give it to her, but only if he got something in return. The girl awkwardly looked down and decided to refuse his offer, but as if she did so for some other reason than because she just didn't want to. Chu Xiu said that in that case she would go study in silence. He pulled a red apple out of his pocket and reminded her that since she was now a mortal she needed to eat, and he had brought the apple as her food. Meng Di turned away in disgust and quietly mouthed that it was all his fault, calling him a nasty student. She shouted that she would definitely kill him somehow. After saying that, Chu Xiu pushed her onto the bed to stop talking, turning away from the girl angry because of his actions. He headed in the opposite direction with the words that the master was beginning to annoy him. He said that he had set up a death formation in the next room, so she better not go in there unannounced. But her apprentice still needed help with improving his skills. Almost at the exit door, he added that if she died, he would be very sad. The girl shouted in his wake that someday she would tear him into small pieces. Chu Xiu was sitting on a couch in the meditation hall and alone in silence reading a book that was illuminated by a bright yellow light. From the book, he obtained a flower-shaped item. It was a Shangsheng ascending fruit. Its grade is divine. It is a valuable treasure for foundation building. After consuming the fruit, one can build perfect strong skill bases. After consuming it, mortals immediately leap over the Bian boundaries and increase their lifespan to 1,000 years. It grows at the bottom of the Tianqiong demonic abyss. 3 fruits ripen once every 10,000 years. Once there was a divine lands master who exchanged 3 top-grade techniques in 2 divine-grade techniques for this fruit to provide the best skill bases for his favorite disciple. Chu Xiu looked at this fruit and decided that with this Dao Jing, which was revered as the best skill foundation formation technique among the heavens and earths, combined with the Shangsheng stimulating fruit and system, would improve his skills, and indeed, in the entire Tianqiong Continent, no one would have a better skill foundation apart from him. Unhurriedly, he was about to take a bite of this fruit to increase his strength. He boldly took a bite of it. A piece of this incredible plant went into his stomach and never stopped shining with bright yellow rays. In the open book, the pages began to turn on their own from the supreme powers that Chu Xiu was applying at the moment. He kept repeating in his head that he was accepting the Tao Jing and rebuilding his foundations. Divine channels were intertwined throughout his body, and the main ball of their cluster was at the place of the solar plexus. The system messages that came one after another put him on notice that the master's skills were decreasing to a lesser stage each time, and eventually the master became immortal. He opened his eyes abruptly after the actions were over, as if he had become a different person, which was partially true. The system message appeared in front of him again with the choice to activate the breakthrough or not. He said yes without hesitation confidently. The next alert said that it was noticed that the master was using the strongest foundation technique Tao Jing. The consumption of breakthrough points had increased, approximately 100 points per month. In the first month after absorbing the Shangsheng strengthening fruit, the technique used was at the first breakthrough stage. In the second month after absorbing the strengthening fruit, the technique used had reached the second breakthrough stage. In the third month the technique had reached the third breakthrough stage. In the ninth month after absorbing the Shangsheng fruit, the technique used had reached the ninth breakthrough stage. He opened his eyes, which were shining with yellow light, the same as the fruit he had absorbed. Said that everyone thinks that 9 is the maximum number and stops at that level. Around him the bright light swallowed the darkness. His consciousness was in the process of activating a breakthrough. However, going beyond the norm is the path to perfection. In rebirth there is a huge risk of dying, but it is just as huge as the rewards. 7 days later he was still in the same state. He opened his eyes, which were already a normal color, no longer glowing from the fruit. His body had been in the air the whole time, the wind blowing his hair and long cloak in different directions. The real breakthrough was finally finished. The master had successfully passed the 10 stages of foundation creation, spending 10 months 1,000 breakthrough points. The master now had 0 points. Chu Xiu's shouting that he had finally done it could be heard from the temple. Above the high cliff that was on the Tangsan Peak Valley, a dark tornado was spinning, mixed with lightning bolts that were visible due to constantly colliding, creating an electric light. There was a girl standing on the mountain in a gazebo watching such a phenomenon. Her gaze was confident and cold, without a hint of fear. This girl's name is Lu Xiu. She is a Tangsan Peak master. In her mind were thoughts of what a strong flow of spiritual energy this is. Has this pathetic-looking Chi Meng Di made a breakthrough? Where Chu Xiu was, there was water underneath him. Absolutely everything was illuminated with yellow light. He was sitting in the lotus posture while being in the air instead of on the ground. Now the physical body and the collected spiritual energy had reached its peak. His hands showed a gesture as if he was holding a large ball. It was him mentally creating a ball of energy, and today he would already free himself from all shackles by laying the strongest skill base. The alert said that the master had made a breakthrough to the higher realm, from the base of the 10th layer to the sea realm chakra stage, finally entering the normal state of his body. He said with a smile that the reward mechanism was very easy to start. He couldn't wait to show the demon lord his reward. He ran from his seat to see the reward. Ahead of him was a yellow light that enveloped everything around him. He was receiving messages saying that the master had reached the maximum and now the reward mechanism would activate, to which he was eager to see. The messages also included congratulations on receiving the ancient primordial tree. Suddenly his eyes widened in shock. He had just read a message from the system about the ancient body. He didn't understand why exactly. The ancient primordial body tree had limitless consumption of resources. The message said that the merging of the master with the ancient primordial body was starting. Chu Xiu tried to stop the merging as it was not according to plan, but he didn't have time and the merging had already succeeded. He was frustrated with the new problems. Going through the breakthroughs, it was difficult to improve his skills, and now this ancient primordial body. He was angry and said that it was all a stupid system. How could he even play under such conditions? The system sent him an explanation. The pros of the ancient primordial body is that it is an invincible physical body that has no equal in strength. The strongest fighting body of the human race. At one time the ancient primordial body was chosen by heaven and earth. Easy to develop. It was sought after by all the great emperors, and those who possessed it achieved the greatest heights. The disadvantages of the ancient primordial body was that in ancient times, the laws of heaven and earth changed, and the ancient primordial body was no longer suitable for skill development. Its development began to consume too many resources, and even if a person searched all the sacred lands, he would still not be able to achieve the breakthrough needed for development. To summarize, in the current time, an ancient primordial body equals a useless body. Chu Xiu sat moodlessly while the system messages in front of him kept popping up. He turned back and said to himself that he was still flying in the clouds. Who knows how many breakthrough points he would need before the next breakthrough. With these words, he looked at his system profile. He decided that since he had merged with the ancient primordial body, he could only continue to chew on the granite of development. With a sly smile on his face, he remembered that luckily he had his precious master. He was already on his way to the temple humming his favorite songs. Upon entering the temple, he immediately found himself in the front hall where Meng Di was sitting in her seat. She was eating the apple that Chu Xiu had brought her. Since she was now a mortal, she wouldn't be able to go without food all the time. Chu Xiu asked if it was delicious. The girl did not stop biting into it and said that it was delicious. As she suddenly noticed that someone had just spoken to her, her eyes immediately filled with rage. She saw the as always smiling Chu Xiu in front of her, once again calling him an unruly disciple. He came closer to her and sat next to her, a little hugging her shoulders. With a smile asked if she missed him, since it had been a couple of days since their last meeting, but it seemed as if it had been several winters. The girl sat with a disgruntled face and did not answer him. Gently he kissed her shoulder. Sitting next to her he asked when was the last time she took a shower. Meng Di got even more angry at him. With a resentful look, she replied that it was because he had forcefully occupied the back hall, and now she couldn't even wash herself because of that. Chu Xiu gently took her hand and admitted his guilt, saying that it was her disciple's fault. Well, since that was the case, he asked to let his disciple personally prepare her bath. He started walking towards the bathroom to fulfill his promise. The girl ran after him asking what he was up to this time. Chu Xiu with a good mood replied that she could not worry as he would not do anything to her. They came to the back hall. The girl lay down on the bathing spot. Blue stones were laid out around it, which were covered with clear water. Steam filled the fresh air. Chu Xiu pressed her hands raised up admiring the girl, said that the divine body definitely lives up to its name. Even after a few days without a bath, it remains unstained, with skin of white jade. Meng Di angrily only said that he was a disobedient disciple. He gently kissed her hand with snow-white skin again. He said that her disciple was indeed doing badly, with a request to account for it with her personally. Meng Di tried to dodge his touch, to pull away and just not look him in the eye. Suddenly she heard someone coming to the threshold of the hall. Standing in the outer courtyard by the closed doors was a long-haired, blonde guy with a sword behind his back. It was Tiana Peak Master Tang Xiang. He was addressing Meng Di like a little sister, asking if she had already come out of seclusion. Chu Xiu was not stopped by his arrival. He continued to do what he had planned. Meng Di was trying to respond to her brother with a request and forgiveness that she had made a mistake while she was developing her skills, and today she would not be able to meet her brother in person. Chu Xiu received a message from the system that he had already earned a special reward. One more session with the master and he would be able to obtain the mystical weapon, the Azura Blood Sword. Tang Xiang held a bowl filled with something in his hand. He told his sister that he had a specially made healing medicine for her from her younger brother, meaning himself, from the peak of the alchemy cauldron. It would help her recover her wounds. The message from the system said that interacting with the divine fragrant body gives a plus 100 developmental giftedness. Meng Di tried to stop Chu Xiu, saying that she needed to rest for a couple days, but the system kept sending a message saying that interacting with the divine body gives a plus 100 giftedness. Tang Xiang did not wait for a reply from his sister and sadly exhaled. He continued to say that he wanted to ask if she knew that her disciple Chu Xiu and Jiang Meng from Tangjing Peak had decided to duel again, and also he had heard that her disciple had a low talent. He was worried about it, that his losing would affect Peak Yunxia's honor. While Chu Xiu was holding her hands, she shouted to her brother that she knew about this event but could not interfere in his affairs, so let him participate. The alert warned that the host's talent had reached 617. This is a divine class. The speed of skill development had increased to 25 laps. Tang Xiang sat down to play the violin with thoughts that his sister probably thinks he is making too much noise. The name of this tune that gently poured out of the instrument Courtship of the Phoenix. He got the inspiration when he was watching the moon a few nights ago. Said this tune is for his sister. Meng Di lay on her side hugging her body with her arms around her body with a very sad look. She told Chu Xiu that he was a terrible person. He in turn stroked her hair with a smile. She was very ashamed that she was talking to her brother while he was doing this to her. Chu Xiu said that Master Tianqiong was excellent at playing the violin. He was even starting to like her brother. The girl, without turning her head to him, asked him to shut up. He was given 500 breakthrough points as a reward. Here he asked his master if she would mind if he took her resources for development. The girl was perplexed by his insolence towards her. Chi Mengdi's courtyard was peaceful at the moment. The street was lit by lanterns and the bright moon in the night sky. Meng Di herself was sitting on a specially designated place on the floor in the lotus posture to catch peace and harmony. Next to her was Chu Xiu, who brought her a tray of food and put it beside the girl, saying that these were all medicines of the 4th layer, and only a few of them were of the 5th layer. The girl said with an annoyed look that there was nothing else, and as long as he didn't unseal it, this was all the treasures she could get from the storage ring. Chu Xiu headed to leave with the words that it didn't matter. At least there was a 4000th top-level spirit stone in there. It was better than nothing. He thanked his master and waved goodbye. Her gaze was sad. Knowing that Chu Xiu might not be able to remove the seal anytime soon, she began to think of other options to solve her problem. Left alone, the girl thought that maybe she could seek the help of a sacred master. Maybe she could still help remove the seal. But she realized that if she failed and her apprentice felt it, he would simply run away. So she couldn't risk it. She fell to her knees and started pounding her fist on the floor in anger, screaming that would she really stay immortal forever and die of old age. This was no longer like Qi Mengdi's life. From under her dress, in the chest area, she pulled out a mask. It was lucky that she hid it before Chu Xiu sealed her power. Thank goodness she didn't search her body. Otherwise he would have taken away that bronze fox mask as well. She might not be able to recover her skills, but with this yellow-tinted mask, one could hide the presence of any cultivator. As long as she avoided direct contact with people, no one would know that her skills were sealed. At least she wouldn't be attacked by enemies. She looked carefully at the mask in her hands again and said that this mask was dropped by Demon Chu when she was chasing him. And after all, he could have taken over the entire world if he evolved properly. He wouldn't have ended up like this. But in any case, it's already in the past. With those words she put that mask on her face. Now she has to figure out how to get rid of the imprisonment of this unruly disciple. Otherwise she will remain under his control for the rest of her life. Chu Xiu questioningly looked somewhere to the side as if he sensed something. He was in his room and thought about the fact that the master had finally put on the bronze fox mask, which meant that his efforts were not in vain. Picturing her beautiful body with the fox mask in his head, he marveled at her beauty, wondering how he could now develop peacefully in the sacred lands of Taisu with his beautiful master by his side. He picked up a sword that was red and yellow in color, called the Blue Blood Mystic Sword. He said that although the reward system wasn't the best, but it wasn't that bad. The duel was 3 days away. There wasn't much time, so now he had to develop diligently. He put 2 fingers of one hand up in front of his face with the words sword development. A red light began to appear around him and hair began to develop. His body remained sitting on the floor in the same pose as he started, and his spirit floated forward on the sword he received from the system. After that he received a message from the system that the master was comprehending the state and seeking his purpose. With a confident look he rushed forward towards his goal. As he climbed upwards, the system informed him time after time how many meters he had already flown. With rapid speed he was at 9,990 meters in height, leaving a trail of dark clouds behind him. Just as suddenly, his gaze changed to shock. In front of him were rays of bright colors that emanated from the ground into the sky. Their edge could not be seen. It seemed to be the purpose of the sword. He put 2 fingers in front of his face as he always did to say the words to use higher powers, and said to comprehend the purpose of the sword. From his head went a red beam into a large cluster of energy that stretched all the way up from the ground. This beam came from the center of his forehead. His eyes were closed and his mind was focused on the spell. Opening his eyes, his gaze was cold as if he was staring into the void without any emotion. An alert from the system congratulated him on successfully finding his intended purpose. One of the 5 purposes of the sword was the divine punishment of the sword he had received. Reading this message, he smiled at the fact that this destiny wasn't bad enough, plus it suited his style. He turned around on the sword in the opposite direction, said when he returned to the room he would try to achieve a breakthrough in the purpose of his sword, and if he could achieve a breakthrough, he would end the duel with a single blow. On Taisu's sacred land, a strange event was seen in the night sky over the neighboring land not far from the Mengdi temple. A girl named Taisu Zi, who was a sacred master of the Taisu sacred land, said that just now someone was searching for the purpose of the sword in the divine lands. It was quite interesting who it was and why. She looked up at the sky, in which there was a circle of red light with small rays coming from downwards. She was surprised that the stranger had reached 9,999 meters. Not many people had reached that level yet, so she wondered how such a thing was even possible. The girl flew higher to get a better look and said that 30,000 years, only the sword god, the emperor of the false realm from the realm of boundless blades, was able to reach such heights. Could it be that someone of the level of the sword god had appeared in Taisu's sacred lands? Since an ordinary person such as them would hardly be able to reach such heights. 3 days later, the sun was shining brightly at the dueling arena in Tangsan Peak. On this day, Chu Xiu's rematch with his opponent was to take place. Many residents had already gathered around the place for the fight. One of the guys confirmed the fact that it was quite lively today. It was Jian Lingyun, the managing disciple of Peak Tangjian, who in turn stood nearby with a satisfied face. He turned to Lingyun and said that he had heard that he had recently made a breakthrough and entered the realm of divine powers. This was really good news for him. The guy replied that it was just the realm of divine powers. It was nothing special, as if he wanted to appear that this level was no problem for him. Su Tianjian, the managing disciple of Tangjian Peak, came over to them. Lingyun turned to her and said with surprise that he never thought he would see her here. He thought she would not come to such a boring place. The girl replied that this whole situation happened because of her, so she would have come to watch anyway. She knew Chu Xiu after all and would not want to see him die today. The guy frowned and thought, what did such a beautiful girl find in this loser Chu Xiu? This question was bringing out his emotions of anger. Jian Meng turned to Tianjian and mockingly said that there was no way she could save someone who was looking for her from death. The guy standing behind them added that competing with Jian Meng, with his worm-like strength level, was simply suicidal. People were talking about how Yunxia Peak was letting such a trash to be his little brother. Chu Xiu was still not with them. They said that he must have been scared and that was why he didn't come. A girl with pink hair appeared in front of them. She was called Tao Yao. She was Yunxia's fifth sister. She loudly told everyone that they were all just praising the strong and scolding the weak, enjoying mocking others. Did their master teach them that? Everyone started pointing their fingers at her, saying that it was Peak Yunxia's fifth sister who had come. Someone said that she had also come to watch the duel. She looked like a confident girl. People were happy to see her appearance and shouted her name behind her backs, thus cheering her on. Above the heads of those watching, Chu Xiu appeared on some sort of transportation vehicle. Someone shouted loudly that he had already arrived. It was a rental boat. He stood straight with a cold gaze, fully prepared for battle. He stood on the ground and his sister Tao Yao immediately came running over to him. Chu Xiu was happy to see her, although he didn't expect her to come as well. She said with an anxious voice that as long as she was here, no one would hurt him. Chu Xiu stroked her hair and smilingly told her not to worry, reassured her that he had everything under control. She said that 20 days ago she was developing hard and her older brother got hurt. Because of that she now felt guilty. Chu Xiu replied that he was fine and it wasn't her fault. He turned his gaze to the side and thought about something. When he saw a beautiful girl with a proud expression not far away, he realized that it seemed to be the girl that Jiang Meng was in love with. Evaluating her appearance, he thought to himself that she had a good figure, but alas, her skills were mediocre. Tianjian in turn wondered why she felt that Chu Xiu had become a completely different person. Jian Meng asked his older brother Lingyun with a sly smile if he should still use the killing wind when Tao Yao is here. The latter replied that this is still a duel. Then what is stopping him from doing so? Tao Yao is not capable of shaking the heavens alone, so she said to kill absolutely. Jian Meng agreed with his opinion and decided to follow his advice. He stepped forward a little and with a confident look, he told Chu Xiu, who was talking to his sister at this time, that since he had come here, it was time to blow up the arena. It was better not to waste his time as he needed to get back to training. Chu Xiu smiled and warned that he had something to say before they started. There were quite a lot of people in the life and death arena on this special day. Even those who were not particularly expected to be there had come. Chu Xiu addressed everyone present. He began his speech, saying that today was a rare event where they had all come together to watch a fight. But what kind of fight is it if there is no prize? He said that for this occasion, he had a bottle of level 7 mystic medicine, 6 pieces. They were all of the highest quality. He offered to make a bet. He received a notification that sarcastically said that our master was evil himself, making a fool of himself to confuse them and profit from their resources. The reward he received from the system was 300 breakthrough points. Chu Xiu understood his actions and smiled slyly. The guy in the crowd was dumbfounded. Was this the 7th level legendary mystic medicine? The other guy standing beside him told him that he had heard that taking this medicine increased the speed of comprehension of divine skill, and also greatly increased the chance of reaching the divine realm and breaking through to the lower holy realm. Jiang Meng asked Chu Xiu what his conditions were. At this moment, he was thinking that he had just reached the divine realm a few days ago, and he needed this medicine. He never thought that this trash Chu Xiu himself would bring it to him on a platter. Tao Yao fearfully turned to her elder brother to try and dissuade him as she realized that if the master admitted about this argument, she would get very angry. Chu Xiu looked thoughtfully at the bottle with the green medicine inside that he held in his hand. He said that it seemed like they did not fully understand the value of this medicine. He asked Elder Tang Sen if he knew about it. The old-aged man from the crowd looked at him in surprise. He did not expect Chu Xiu to say something about him as well. He coughed while holding onto his cane and began to tell him that this medicine is a small-size medicine. If it were to be auctioned, it would be worth at least 1,000,000 high stacks of spirit stones, and 6 medicines are equal to 6,000,000 high stacks of spirit stones. The surrounding people opened their mouths in surprise at how expensive this medicine was. One of the guys, after hearing his words, decided to think about what he should put, which was equal to the price of 6,000,000 tall stacks of spiritual stones. Chu Xiu smilingly told them not to be so nervous. If one person couldn't afford such a thing, then they could join forces. All they needed to do was to split the price according to their savings at the end of the match. The two guys happily looked one-on-one with the words that they could join forces. The guys started to put their jewelry on one small square blanket. More and more people joined in on the idea and put their things together. Most of them bet on Chu Xiu losing with words that he would definitely lose. But Chu Xiu happily told them not to jump to conclusions and they still had time to think carefully. His sister Xiaoyao was dumbfounded by what was happening and just stood there watching. Chu Xiu crouched down near the pile of the others' belongings to put one bottle of mystic medicine there and smiled. Everything was going according to his plan as expected. They all bet on him losing, proudly thinking that he had hit the jackpot in this matter. The elder glanced in his direction and thought that there were many good things lying there. Chu Xiu rejoiced. He decided that the dispute was still on, and the judge would be the Tangxin Peak elder. No one would dare to refute the judge's decision. Chu Xiu jumped up from his seat towards Jin Meng. He landed in front of him. From his loud landing rumble, street dust flew to the sides. Jiang Meng stood confidently in front of him with his arms crossed over his chest, laughing that Trash Chu had finally climbed into the ring. He rose from his feet with a sinister look and said that since they were in the arena, it was time to stop fluttering tongues. The elder shouted with a declaration that the duel was starting. Waving his hand, he formed a golden-colored dome over them. The boy said to himself with a smile, "This was it." Jiang Meng had already started to use his strength, saying that he was now at the peak of the 9th stage of the Sea of Consciousness realm fighting against Trash Chu, who was only at the 4th stage of the Sea of Consciousness realm. His gaze spoke of his confidence in his actions, saying that isn't it as simple as swatting a mosquito. After these thoughts, he abruptly tore out of his seat, leaving only a stream of air behind him. With a determined look of victory, he was already approaching Chu Xiu, who was still only reacting to what actions to use next. Jiang Meng, with his sword on his back, crouched down on one arm in front of the guys to strike from underneath and bring him to the floor. Chu Xiu continued to just stand there. He managed to kick him in the face with such force that the guy was thrown backwards. When Chu Xiu managed to get one foot on the floor, red rays spread out from that spot in different directions. Jian Meng was surprised. The guy didn't immediately fall down, but pushed off with his foot to keep his balance and thus jumped backwards. He landed right on his feet, telling Jiang Meng that he was not bad enough. He smiled as he thought he was much stronger. He picked up a sharp sword, shouting how he could do such a thing. Purple rays were sharpening around him, threw a few of them at the guy and told him to dodge. If he could do it, of course. One of those flew with its sharp end right into Chu Xiu's heart plexus area. But because of his quick reaction, he was able to arch backwards so that the sword flew over him and didn't kill him. The weapon's sharp end stuck into the stone surface where the fight was taking place. Tao Yao was surprised, saying that the heavens had blessed her older brother, that he was so good at dodging blows. The guys nearby shouted that Jiang Meng was not holding back at all. All his attacks are deadly, and if Chu Xiu slows down a little, he will eventually lose. One of the guys decided to bet everything on the fact that it will be so. The voices supported his words that Chu Xiu has no chance of winning. Before Chu Xiu could get into his usual posture after dodging the sharp swords hitting him, Jiang Meng once again rushed towards him at a fast speed. Purple rays flashed on his hand that was standing straight up to be ready to use force. He attempted to swing at him, but Chu Xiu stepped back a little and Jiang Meng once again missed with the strike. Chu Xiu mocked him with his middle finger and tongue, telling him to finally hit him if he could. This behavior made Jiang Meng even more angry. He was already angry because he couldn't hit him, and his mockery. He thought to himself that this guy was too dodgy. He couldn't go on like this. He was setting himself up for the next successful strike. He decided to go to extremes already and took hold of the handle of his sword that was behind his back. He said he would finish him off. He drew his sword and began to swing it at him with fury. His weapon was very long, so Chu Xiu had to dodge in different directions to avoid being caught. Chu Xiu looked at him and thought that he seemed to want to defeat him with his sword breath. Accepting his idea, he began to pull out his sword with thoughts that it was time to test out the new weapon. He proudly waved his sword upwards, which left a red trail in the air. Jiang Meng was surprised by this action. Chu Xiu made a cut in the dome they were dueling in and ran outside. Jiang Meng said with a mad smile. Finally, that trash had finally opened up. As he caught up to him, he swung at him, shouting for him to die, calling him trash. He swung his foot at him while in the air. Chu Xiu covered his face with his hands, trying to hide from the blow. Chu Xiu smiled. His opponent had fallen for his plan. Holding the handle of his sword, he thought to himself that although his first body was still undeveloped, he was unrivaled in close combat in the same realms. Without missing an opportunity, he started the fight with his sword, leaving the red color already behind him. With this last move, he slashed his opponent's throat. Before he realized how he had done it, the blood left behind red puddles. Jiang Meng's sword remained stuck in the ground, and a few meters away from him stood Chu Xiu with his weapon lowered down. Next to him lay the body of his opponent. Everyone who was watching their fight fell silent from what they saw, as they did not expect such an ending. The guy who was somehow related to Jiang Meng was very angry at this outcome. Surrounding the people who were watching their fight was a dueling field under a dome, within which could be seen Jiang Meng's still body on the floor, and the opponent who had killed him, Chu Xiu, beside him. No one could believe that the one they had bet on and given away a lot of their precious items to win had unexpectedly lost in the end. The two guys in the crowd were saying that Chu Xiu, being at the fourth stage of the ocean consciousness realm, had defeated someone who was at the peak of the ocean consciousness realm. Jiang Meng had kind of destroyed his cultivation 20 days ago. They didn't understand what was going on and how he managed to win. Tang Xin was reading his speech that proclaimed, "In the life and death arena, the victorious Chu Xiu." The guy stood proudly beside him. People began to cry out with tears in their eyes because everything they had bet was now lost. Some were speaking for their rank 300 spirit stone, some had lost their mystic weapon. One of them was saying that he would never participate in the debate again because he had lost so much this time. Just as suddenly, unexpectedly, Chu Xiu spat out blood since he was injured in the battle before. Tiao immediately ran over to help her older brother while he held on to his sword, which was stuck in the ground, to somehow not fall to the floor. She panicked and began to ask how he was feeling. Chu Xiu asked her to help him reach the places of true disciples. The girl of course agreed, as she was worried about him. He looked up with a smile. His face was splattered with blood. He thought to himself with mockery for those guys who lost everything. Now all their tools, pills, jewels and spirit stones already belonged to him. His sister helped him walk, supporting him so he wouldn't fall again. The guy standing not far from them looked at him suspiciously. He had a plan in his mind. Chu Xiu is strong but injured. He decided that he would make him leave this day with nothing. He turned to the guy named Chun Lingfei and said that it was his turn. The guy lowered his gaze down to adjust. He turned to Chu Xiu, who was walking with his sister, to rest, and shouted to him to wait and not to hurry to go, as he wanted to offer him something. Lingfei held out his hand with an offer if he wanted to fight him. Tiao turned around to him and grudgingly said that Chu Xiu was injured. If he didn't notice it, what was he even thinking challenging him to a fight? The guy who was standing not far away from her said that she had no right to decide for others, and her brother could not avoid the offer of battle if he still came to the life and death arena. Besides, Chu Xiu had taken so many resources in a single match. He might just be unlucky, he said. Surely everyone was now doubting the fairness of his victory. He said that now that there was a chance, why not give Chu Xiu a chance to fight Chen Lingfei, and if Chu Xiu did win, they would all accept his victory. And he thought for himself that it would serve as a lesson to Chu Xiu and everyone. He asked Chu Xiu if he would accept the dispute, and since he had given enough arguments to convince the people of his righteousness, he was unlikely to refuse. Chu Xiu frowned at him. This guy is already starting to piss him off. Chu Xiu decided to justify himself and press pity by saying that he was currently injured, and was only at the fourth stage of the ocean consciousness realm. Fighting someone at the first stage of the divine bridge realm was too risky, so he decided to raise the bet in the argument by another 30%. His new alert said that he was on a roll today. Not only was he despicable, but he was also greedy. He had received a reward from the system in the form of 200 breakthrough points. Chu Xiu understood his actions and was glad that he did so, as despite his unplanned fight, things were going in a better direction. The guy expected such a response, said to himself that weaklings are always greedy, and he would only have himself to blame for his death. Tang Jian exhaled heavily with a question of when will Chu Xiu stop already. He struck the shaman's tambourine with a shout that look, he will fight again in the life and death arena. They want their treasures back, so they have another chance to become rich. The people were happy that they could now get their things back and were ready to give more than they gave last time, as they were sure that Chu Xiu would definitely lose this time. This time, Chu Xiu would be fighting with a disciple from the Maroon Bridge realm, and it was already impossible to win, especially since he had just finished the fight. Now he was too weak. The guys began to go to the rest of the treasures, throwing more there, with the certainty of getting their things back at the end of this fight. Someone even bet everything on him losing. This was just to Chu Xiu's advantage. He was confident in his strength and that they would all be impoverished after today. The two opponents under the Golden Dome were already standing in the arena. Elder Tangsun shouted with a raised hand that the fight involving Chu Xiu versus Ling Fei had begun. His younger sister Tiao Yao was in an elated state. The same question kept popping up in her mind, whether her elder brother could win this time. Chu Xiu looked at her with a confident gaze with the words that she could not worry. He knew how to win this fight. Ling Fei said with a calm look that he didn't want to fight him, but he had his own reasons. Chu Xiu inquired as to what his reasons might be. He replied that his little sister was seriously injured on the mission, and to save her life, a rather rare treasure that big brother Ling Yun has is needed. For the sake of his little sister, he has to do his bidding. Pulling out the sword from behind his back, he said that he can only ask for his forgiveness now, adding that since swords don't have eyes, let her not blame him for her death. There was only calmness on his face and a bit of regret that he has to do this. Chu Xiu sarcastically said that this is certainly a very soul-stirring story. He said with a sly smile that it was very funny. They couldn't talk about death in the life and death arena. Ling Fei didn't have time to draw his sword before he looked at the place where Chu Xiu was supposed to be standing, but was surprised as he was no longer there. He in turn made a sudden movement and was ready for an attack from behind. Turning around, he jumped back after swiping his sword through the air but did not touch his opponent. Ling Fei, noticing him, shouted that he had attacked from the back, which not everyone does. Chu Xiu was at his side and said that he would take care of his little sister, wishing him to rest in peace. These words sounded like the last words that Ling Fei could hear in the last seconds of his life. He stabbed his body through from the back, pulling out a blade that was in the poisonous red hue of his blood. While the body had not yet fallen to the floor, Chu Xiu channeled the maximum amount of power that could be seen behind his bright light into his palm. He abruptly spat it all out at his opponent, who was thrown far forward due to the wave. The people looked at his body that was visible through the dome that he had hit hard. Ling Fei's face pressed against the walls. He slid down its walls, leaving a trail of blood behind him. Chu Xiu said that he died because he had long talked about his hard life and was completely confident in his victory. Chu Xiu shoved his bloody sword back with the words that he couldn't stand talking for too long. People looked on in shock. No one expected that Chu Xiu would be able to win this time, and how could it be possible? Everyone knew that he was only at the 4th stage of the ocean of consciousness. Could he really defeat Qin Yunfei in this fight? This technique that Chu Xiu had just used was the mystic level shadow concealment technique. He had left behind 7 shadows, meaning that he had mastered the technique to perfection. Those who had bet on one of the participants in the battle realized with horror that this time they had actually lost everything they had. They started to panic, screaming why they had even bet. One of the guys had just bet 10,000 top-level spiritual stones but lost them all. Tiao Yao ran up to her big brother shouting that he was so damn cool. She was very happy for him. Chu Xiu waved his hand away and said that he just did what he had to do and there was nothing wrong with it. But he realized that he had done a lot even though he was talking himself out of it. He sat down near all the treasures that he won and began to look at his prize with a gleam in his eyes, saying that this day was just wonderful. Chu Xiu asked his younger sister if she had a free treasury, as it was full. The guys who were standing behind him looked at him with a feeling that they had become like poor people, as this guy was able to win everything from them. Tiao Yao happily threw him a small loose pouch. Chu Xiu thanked her with a smile. She said that he could use it as much as he wanted. Chu Xiu tossed the top-level mystic capsule in his hand, addressing the losers. Didn't they want it? The guys started shouting to him, asking for regret over them. One of them even at this moment coughed up blood with the words that Chu Xiu didn't come here for a fight, but for treasures. Chu Xiu arrogantly replied to their words that if that was all it was, then he could already go home since everything he wanted had already been obtained. The guy headed towards his boat, which at this time was in the air waiting. As he passed by, people all looked at him obliquely. His expression was smug. At this time he received a notification that the master was indeed terrible and ruthless, a true evil. For this good work in his image he received a system award of 200 breakthrough points. Tiao Yao's younger sister, with fear in her eyes, warned her brother that he had angered Jiang Lingyan today, and he was a cruel person, so he had better be careful. Who knows what one might get from him without expecting it. Chu Xiu, despite this, proudly crossed his arms on his chest and silently flew his boat further on his business. In the Master Temple, in his room, he spread out all the treasures he had obtained on the floor. He had one items worth 1,600,000 spirit stones, wondering even how many breakthrough points he would earn from all of this. picked up a sharp sword from the treasure pile. He pressed the system alert on the exchange button of this thin mortal blade. After that, his mortal blade began to disappear, dissolving on the spot. For exchanging it, he only received 1 breakthrough point. Chu Xiu was dumbfounded at such a small reward, as he had expected a bit more. This can't be true. He said that it must be some kind of mistake, as last time he received 5 breakthrough points when he exchanged the mortal equipment. But why did he only receive 1 point now? The system sent a notification that as the host's ascension increases, so does the quality of the equipment consumed, but the breakthrough points also depend on the quality. And it was also written that the system can only apologize if the host wants to get more breakthrough points with low-quality items, but he can also directly exchange spirit stones for breakthrough points if he was interested. The whole problem is the ratio of roots to points. Chu Xiu resentfully looked at these messages. He decided that since it was like this, he would send the cheap items to Zhubao Peak and exchange the expensive ones. Only in this way would he get the most benefits. Just as suddenly, he became wary. Chu Xiu realized that a bronze fox mask was being used. Wondering who the master was talking to right now, within the Taisu Peak land, there was a conversation going on in the temple. Someone was talking to the manager of the area about what she was saying. Chu Xiu had traveled to the deepest part of the beginnings lands and found the legendary purpose of the primordial sword. It was Meng Di who spoke, asking how such a thing was possible. Her disciple had no talent at all, let alone a destiny. Even entering the beginning lands would be impossible for him, and this was such a level. Without turning around, the girl replied that she had seen everything with her own eyes that night. She asked Meng Di that maybe her student had changed in some way recently. The girl took her hint and asked her if she meant that he was possessed. The girl thought about looking somewhere in the distance, warily said that she had thought about it, but quickly dismissed such a thought, because to possess someone, you need to be at the stage of development of at least the lower sacred realm, and to reach it, you need to have their own purpose, which before Chu Xiu did not have. He was basically not particularly strong. They were both standing on a high cliff. A circle of red light remained in the sky above them, which indicated that someone had recently tried to reach their destiny. She said that everyone could only set foot on the lands of beginnings once in a lifetime, and even those who possessed the souls of others could not break this sacred rule, so she did not think that Chu Xiu was possessed. Meng Di asked if her disciple was not possessed after all. Then how was he able to get deep into the lands of beginnings? She added that perhaps in that case, he had gained some incredible abilities. The girl turned to Meng Di and firmly said that she must train this disciple well. Perhaps their sacred lands of Taisu awaited a future with a new emperor, a sword deity. Meng Di did not contradict her. Although this guy annoyed her, she still agreed as she had no other choice. Behind the bronze fox mask was Meng Di's sad face. How could she train him well? This means she has to continue to be a doormat to gain experience, which she definitely didn't want to do since she can't do anything but that. Chu Xiu stood outside the temple with his arms crossed on his chest. Remembering his favorite master, Meng Di, he said to himself that since Taisu Zi was asking for it herself, she would have to have another good training with him. He entered his master's room, who was on her bed at this time. Her face was still wearing the bronze fox mask. Chu Xiu approached her and said that her disciple had come to seek knowledge again. The girl called him a naughty disciple with a question as to why he was hiding it from her. Chu Xiu, as if he didn't understand what she was talking about, asked what exactly she was talking about. Meng Di replied that she was referring to the fact that he had found the purpose of the primordial sword. He gently put his arm around her waist, asking how the master knew about it. The girl started to say that the Divine Master was one of the strongest cultivators of the Holy Realm, controlling the rules of the dimension. There was no way to hide what he was doing while he was searching for the purpose of the sword. Chu Xiu lightly laughed at her words and asked if the Holy Lands had decided to sacrifice their resources for a genius like him. Meng Di was very close to Chu Xiu's face. Lowering her gaze down, she said that Taisu's Holy Lands had no free resources. If he was even the reincarnation of an ancient emperor, he would have to achieve them by his own strength. She cited a quote, "A flower grown in a greenhouse would not be able to handle a storm." The disciple agreed with her words. He plopped her on the bed and hung over her with the words that isn't he here to pursue resources by his own strength. Meng Di started saying that just not today to do it, calling him a vile disciple. He smirked and put his hand on her face and said that now that he was here, and since he had nothing else to do early on, he would like Master to help him level up. Chu Xiu began to kiss her neck. The girl continued to try to get out of his strong embrace. At this time he received a notification that he was once again trying to level up through Master. For this work he had earned a special reward, a jug of grade 6 crane venom. In the moment of raising his level, he was increasingly gaining points to his ascension talent. 6 hours later, the alert said that the master's talent had reached 917. This was a divine rank. His ascension speed had increased by 31 times, and his ascension had improved, and there was only a tiny bit left until the 5th level of the ocean of consciousness. The system wished him success in his endeavors, hinting to level up with the master. Meng Di at this time was lying on the bed without strength and did not say anything. Chu Xiu looked at Meng Di with thoughts that the effect was getting worse. But after all, a divine spirit body can't be so weak. Perhaps it was because the master's powers were sealed. He decided that he might still try to unseal her next time, but immediately changed his mind, as it was still too dangerous an action. He stood in front of the girl with the words that he had caused too much trouble for his master today, so her humble apprentice was leaving. The girl thought to herself that this man was a terrible disciple, and one day she would be able to wipe him into powder from the face of the earth. At the Zhubao Peak territory, a bright not full moon was already shining in the night sky. The tall tower of Zhubao Peak was illuminated by the light, and there were no more people near it since it was late at night. Chu Xiu walked up the steps to the entrance. The guards nearby were whispering that it seemed to be Peak's senior disciple Yunxia. One of them said that he heard that this guy had won 2 fights in a row in the life and death arena. Chu Xiu walked past them heading towards the girl whose face could not be seen due to the dark lighting. The sweetly smiling girl said hello to him and said that Peak Zhubao disciple Chu Xiaoran was happy to welcome Senior Chu Xiu. He gently touched her face. The girl said that Senior Chu Xiu must have come here to sell things.